Nobody believed what happened at Miller's horror house that night. 5 friends went in laughing, but when the lights came back on, only 4 walked out. What happened to Sarah in those missing 47 minutes? The autumn wind rattled the old Miller mansion as Jake pulled into the gravel driveway. "Guys, this place gives me the creeps already," Emma muttered from the back seat, but her nervous laugh betrayed her excitement. "Come on, Em. It's just actors in costumes," Tyler said, adjusting his backward cap. "Besides, Sarah's been talking about this place for weeks." Sarah bounced in the passenger seat, her phone already recording. "This is gonna be epic for my TikTok. The reviews say it's the scariest horror house in 3 states. She panned the camera across the decrepit Victorian mansion, its broken shutters hanging like dead eyes. But what none of them knew was that tonight, one review would never be posted. The 5th friend, Marcus, emerged from behind the car where he'd been tying his shoelace. "Did you guys see that weird van parked behind the trees? Kinda sketchy if you ask me." "Dude, it's probably just part of the show," Jake dismissed, but his eyes lingered on the dark vehicle partially hidden by overgrown branches. They approached the entrance where a gaunt man in tattered clothes took their money. His pale eyes seemed to follow Sarah specifically. "Enjoy your experience," he wheezed, his breath visible in the cold air. "Okay, that guy was actually terrifying," Emma whispered as they walked through the heavy wooden doors. Little did they know, he wasn't acting. The mansion's interior reeked of dampness and something else, something metallic that made Sarah wrinkle her nose. Cobwebs draped every surface, and the floorboards groaned ominously under their feet. "Stay together, guys," Sarah called out, though part of her was already thinking about the solo shots she could get for her content. The first scare came quickly. A zombie burst from a hidden panel, causing Emma to scream and grab Tyler's arm. They all laughed nervously, adrenaline pumping. "See? Just actors," Tyler said, but his voice cracked slightly. They moved through room after room, a mad scientist's laboratory with bubbling beakers, a child's nursery where dolls moved on their own, a kitchen where a chef chopped meat with disturbing enthusiasm. But in the mirrors, they started noticing something strange. "Wait," Marcus stopped suddenly in the Victorian dining room. "Did anyone else see that shadow move differently than ours?" Emma looked back at the ornate mirror behind them. "What do you mean?" "In the reflection, there were 6 of us. But we're only 5 people." Sarah rolled her eyes, still filming. "Guys, it's called special effects. They probably have hidden cameras and projection systems." But Jake had gone quiet, counting heads. "Sarah, Tyler, Emma, Marcus, and me. That's 5. He looked back at the mirror, now showing only their 5 reflections. The 6th reflection had vanished, but something else was watching. The basement level promised the real terror begins here. The walls seemed to close in as they descended narrow, creaking stairs. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows that danced with each step. "Okay, this is actually getting intense," Emma admitted, staying close to the group. "Remember, 30 more minutes and we're out." Jake checked his phone. "It's 9:23 now." Sarah had pushed ahead, drawn by a room labeled "The Finale, Enter Alone." "Sarah, don't!" Tyler called out, but she was already slipping through the doorway. "Just getting some solo footage. Be right back." Those were the last words her friends would hear her speak. Inside the finale room, Sarah found herself in complete darkness. Her phone's flashlight revealed a small, empty space with mirrors on every wall. "Weird," she muttered, trying to find the exit. The door behind her had vanished. "Guys," she called out, her voice echoing strangely. "This isn't funny anymore." Meanwhile, her friends waited outside, growing increasingly concerned. "She's been in there 8 minutes, Marcus checked his watch. "That's way too long for a scare room." "Sarah." Jake pounded on the wall where the door had been. "Sarah." But there was no response. And strangest of all, there was no door. What they discovered next would haunt them forever. Emma ran her hands along the smooth wall. "Guys, this wall is solid. Like, completely solid. There's no seam, no handle, nothing. That's impossible, Tyler breathed. We literally just saw her go through here. The horror house staff, when frantically contacted, insisted there was no finale room in that section. No door. No separate chamber. You kids must be confused, the gaunt man from the entrance said with that same unsettling smile. Perhaps your friend left through another exit? But the friends knew what they'd seen. They'd watched Sarah enter a room that apparently didn't exist. The friends exchanged terrified glances. How do you tell someone that your friend disappeared into a room that isn't there? But the security footage revealed something even more disturbing. Back at the police station, Detective Rodriguez reviewed the horror house's surveillance system. The cameras were old but functional, covering every corridor and room. The footage was crystal clear, 5 friends entering the basement. Sarah approaching a wall, not a door, just a blank wall. She reaches out to touch it, and then she steps forward and vanishes. Not through a door, not around a corner. She literally walks into a solid wall and disappears. I've watched this 50 times, Rodriguez muttered to her partner. There's no editing, no camera tricks. That girl just walked through a wall like it was made of air. And then they found Sarah's phone. The device was discovered 3 days later in the mansion's garden, buried under autumn leaves. But the photos and videos on it told an impossible story. The last video, time-stamped at 9:31 p.m. 8 minutes after Sarah disappeared, showed her in what appeared to be the same finale room. But the room looked different. Older. The mirrors were cracked, the walls were rotting, and in the reflection behind Sarah was a figure that definitely wasn't part of any horror house act. Help me, Sarah whispered to the camera. I can see you guys through the mirrors, but you can't see me. And I'm not alone in here. The video cut to static. But the timestamp revealed something impossible. Detective Rodriguez stared at the phone's metadata. The video was recorded at 9:31 p.m. on October 15, the night Sarah disappeared. But according to the building's power grid, the electricity had been completely shut off at 9:25 p.m. due to the police investigation. How do you film a video in a room with no power? She asked the forensics team. You don't, came the reply. And ma'am, there's something else. The background audio picked up voices. Multiple voices. But they're speaking in what sounds like different time periods.
Rodriguez put on headphones and listened. Behind Sarah's terrified whisper, she could hear faint conversations. A woman's voice from what sounded like the 1940s. A child crying in what the audio expert identified as early 1900s recording quality. And underneath it all, a man's voice speaking in Old English. The mansion's history revealed a pattern that chilled everyone to the bone. Research into the Miller Mansion uncovered records dating back to 1897. The property had been a family home, then a boarding house, then briefly a children's orphanage before being abandoned in 1963. But the really disturbing part was the disappearances. 1923, a boarding house guest named Eleanor Whitman vanished from her locked room. 1941, 2 children from the orphanage disappeared during a game of hide-and-seek. 1958, a maintenance worker named George Chen was never seen again after entering the basement. 1963, the final incident that closed the orphanage, 3 children disappeared simultaneously during Sunday dinner. They were there one moment, gone the next. All of them had been last seen in the basement area. And Sarah's friends were about to discover they weren't the only ones still searching. A week after Sarah's disappearance, Jake received a message on Instagram. The sender's profile was blank, but the message made his blood run cold. She's with us now. In the between place. The room that exists when it wants to. If you come back on the anniversary night, bring a mirror. She can see you, but she needs you to see her. Jake showed the message to the others. The profile had no posts, no followers, and had been created just hours before the message was sent. This is some sick joke, Tyler said, but his hands were shaking. Look at the profile picture, Emma whispered. It was a black square, but when Jake adjusted his phone's brightness, a faint image appeared. 5 figures standing in a basement. One of them looked exactly like Sarah. What happened next changed everything they thought they knew about reality. Against all logic and police warnings, the 4 friends returned to Miller's horror house exactly 1 month later. The building was supposed to be sealed, but somehow the front door was unlocked. They descended to the basement, carrying a large mirror they'd bought from an antique shop. The same mirror Sarah had touched before she disappeared. "Sarah?" Emma called softly. "Sarah, if you can hear us." The basement was silent except for their breathing and the distant sound of October wind through broken windows above. Then, in the mirror's reflection, they saw her. Sarah stood in what looked like the same basement, but wrong somehow. The walls were different colors, the ceiling higher, and behind her, other figures moved in the shadows. The missing people from decades past. "You came back," Sarah's reflection mouthed, though no sound reached them. But rescue would demand a price none of them expected to pay. Through gestures and mouthed words, Sarah tried to communicate. She pointed to the wall where she'd disappeared, then to the mirror, then made a stepping motion. "She wants us to follow her," Marcus realized. "Into the wall?" "That's insane," Tyler protested. But Jake was already moving toward the mirror. "We're not leaving her." As his hand approached the glass surface, it didn't hit solid mirror. His fingers passed through as if the mirror was made of water. "It's some kind of portal," he breathed. Emma grabbed his arm. "Jake, what if you can't come back?" "Then you'll have to find another way," he said, and stepped through. What Jake found on the other side would test the bonds of friendship forever. Jake emerged in what looked like the same basement, but felt fundamentally different. The air was thicker, the sounds muffled, and the shadows moved independently of any light source. "Jake!" Sarah ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "You actually came. But you shouldn't have. This place, it collects people. It's been collecting them for over a century." Around them, the other trapped souls wandered aimlessly. Eleanor from 1923, still in her boarding house dress. The orphanage children, forever young and confused. George the maintenance worker, tools still in hand. "There's a way out," Sarah whispered urgently. "But it only opens once a year, on Halloween night. And only if someone from the outside pulls you through at the exact moment the veil is thinnest." That's tomorrow night, Jake realized. But the house had rules, and breaking them came with consequences. Back in the real basement, Tyler, Emma, and Marcus watched in horror as the mirror's reflection changed. Now they could see Jake and Sarah together, but they could also see something else stalking through the shadows behind them. "There's something hunting them in there," Emma whispered. The entity in the reflection was tall, impossibly thin, and moved with jerky, unnatural motions. It seemed to be searching, sniffing the air like a predator tracking prey. "We need to get them out of there now," Marcus said, reaching for the mirror. "No!" Tyler grabbed his arm. "Look!" Sarah was frantically shaking her head and pointing upward. Through the mirror, they could see her mouthing, "Halloween night. Midnight. One chance." The next 24 hours would determine whether friendship could conquer the supernatural. The 3 friends spent the next day researching everything they could about the Miller mansion. What they found in old newspaper archives made their situation even more terrifying. Every previous disappearance had occurred exactly 1 month before Halloween. And every Halloween night for the past century, locals reported seeing lights and hearing voices from the supposedly empty mansion. It's like the house feeds throughout the year, Emma realized, and Halloween is when it's weakest. When the barrier between our world and, whatever that place is, gets thin enough for rescue attempts. But the newspaper accounts also revealed something else. Not everyone who attempted Halloween rescues had returned. 1924, local man Thomas Wright disappeared while attempting to retrieve Eleanor Whitman. 1959, 2 police officers vanished during rescue operation for the Chin family. They were about to discover that some prices are too high to pay. Halloween night arrived with an unseasonable storm. Lightning illuminated the Miller mansion as Tyler, Emma, and Marcus returned with their mirror and a plan that bordered on suicidal. Remember, Marcus said as they descended to the basement, exactly at midnight. We pull them through together. And if something goes wrong? Nothing's going wrong, Emma said firmly. We're bringing them both home. At 11:58 p.m., they positioned the mirror where Jake had disappeared. In its reflection, they could see their missing friends huddled together, the shadow entity circling closer. It knows, Tyler observed. It knows we're here. 11:59 p.m. Sarah and Jake moved toward their side of the mirror. But the shadow entity was moving too, flowing like liquid darkness directly toward them. Midnight. What happened in the next 60 seconds would haunt the survivors forever. Now! Emma screamed. Tyler and Marcus grabbed Jake's arms as he materialized through the mirror, pulling him back to reality. But Sarah was right behind him when the shadow entity struck. It wrapped around her like living smoke, dragging her backward into the mirror dimension. Her scream was cut short as she was pulled deeper into the reflection. Sarah! Jake lunged back toward the mirror, but it had become solid glass again. In the reflection, they could see Sarah trapped in the entity's grip, growing fainter by the second. But she was fighting, and in her struggle, she managed to mouth one final message. The van. Check the van. Then the mirror went black. The van would reveal the truth that changed everything. Racing outside, the four friends found the van Marcus had noticed earlier. It was older than they thought, covered in rust and overgrown with vines like it had been there for years. The license plate was from 1963. Inside, they found dozens of personal items, watches, jewelry, wallets, all from different decades. And in the glove compartment, a journal written in multiple hands. The Miller house feeds on the energy of the lost. We maintain the collection. We bring the curious ones. The house rewards us with extended life, but we can never leave. The Caretakers, 1897-. The final entry was recent, Sarah Martinez added to collection, October 31st, strong spirit. Will resist longer than most. Current caretaker. And then they realized the horrifying truth about who was really running the horror house. The gaunt man from the entrance wasn't an actor. He was the latest in a century-long line of caretakers, people who'd made deals with whatever lived in the Miller mansion. Bring fresh souls, live longer than humanly possible, but never escape. Looking at the journal's photographs, they recognized him in pictures dating back decades, barely aging. But there was something else in the van. A blueprint of the mansion showing hidden passages, secret rooms, and most importantly a second mirror room in the mansion's tower. Emergency escape route, Jake read aloud. To be used only if primary collection fails. Emma grabbed the blueprint. This is it. This is how we get Sarah back. The house will be weaker tomorrow, Marcus realized. Halloween energy depleted. If we can reach the tower room. But they weren't the only ones who discovered the house's secrets. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A black SUV pulled up to the mansion, and 3 people in dark suits emerged. Government agents? Paranormal investigators? Through binoculars from their hiding spot across the street, the friends watched as the agents entered the mansion with strange equipment. They know about this place, Tyler whispered. They've probably known for years. One agent carried what looked like a large mirror, similar to theirs but more sophisticated, with electronic components attached to its frame. They're not here to investigate, Emma realized with growing horror. They're here to harvest. The race to save Sarah had become a race against something far more sinister. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, "Stay away from the house today. Some collections are too valuable to lose." A friend. Someone's watching us, Marcus said, scanning the street. But they couldn't wait. Every hour Sarah remained trapped made her rescue less likely. According to the caretaker's journal, trapped souls began to fade permanently after 72 hours. They had tonight, or they'd lose her forever. As darkness fell, they watched the agents' vehicles leave. But something felt wrong. Too easy. "It's a trap," Tyler said what they were all thinking. "Doesn't matter," Jake replied, checking the ropes and equipment they'd bought. "We're going in." But inside the mansion, they discovered they weren't alone. The tower room was exactly where the blueprint indicated, but reaching it required navigating through the house's most dangerous sections. Every shadow seemed to move with malevolent purpose. "The mirror's here," Emma whispered as they entered the circular tower room. But they weren't the first to arrive. The agent's sophisticated mirror was already set up, humming with electronic energy. And in its reflection, they could see not just Sarah, but dozens of trapped souls being systematically extracted and contained in what looked like energy cells. "Commercial soul harvesting," Marcus breathed. "They're farming the trapped spirits." Sarah's face appeared in their antique mirror. She looked weaker, more translucent, but she was pointing urgently at something behind the agent's equipment. A timer. Counting down. With less than 4 minutes left, they faced an impossible choice. "It's some kind of extraction device," Tyler realized, reading the agent's equipment labels. "In 4 minutes, every soul in there gets permanently trapped in those containers." "Including Sarah," Emma said. They had 2 options: use their simple mirror to try rescuing just Sarah, or attempt to sabotage the agent's device and potentially free everyone but risk losing Sarah in the process. "What would Sarah want?" Jake asked. They all knew the answer. Sarah would never ask them to save only her while leaving dozens of others trapped. "Okay," Emma said, moving toward the electronic device. "But if this goes wrong?" "It won't," Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. The next 60 seconds would determine the fate of a century's worth of trapped souls. Emma's fingers found what looked like a master control. "I think this is it." The mirrors began resonating, creating a harmonic frequency that made the entire tower shake. Figures began emerging from the agent's mirror, not just Sarah, but Eleanor, the orphanage children, George, all of them becoming more solid, more real.
But the shadow entity was coming too, flowing out of the mirror like liquid nightmare, furious at losing its century-long collection. "Run!" Jake screamed as the entity filled the tower room, its rage palpable and terrifying. Sarah stumbled through their antique mirror, solid and real, but behind her, the other spirits were being pulled back by the entity's fury. Emma's hand slammed down on the emergency release. The explosion of supernatural energy that followed was seen from miles away. When the light faded and the ringing in their ears stopped, the friends found themselves lying in the grass outside the mansion. Sarah was with them, solid and breathing, but changed somehow. The Miller mansion was gone. Not destroyed, gone. Where it had stood was an empty lot with grass that looked like it had been growing undisturbed for decades. "Did we dream this whole thing?" Tyler asked weakly. But Sarah was holding something, an old photograph from the 1920s showing Eleanor Whitman standing in front of the mansion. And on the back, in fresh handwriting, "Thank you. E.W." But their victory had attracted attention from those who prefer such secrets to remain buried. The black SUVs returned the next morning, but now they were looking for the friends. Government agents, private contractors, or something else entirely, it didn't matter. What mattered was that these people wanted the friends to disappear quietly. "You've interfered with a century-long operation," the lead agent explained during what they called a debriefing but felt more like an interrogation. "Certain supernatural phenomena are better left contained." "You were harvesting people's souls," Emma accused. "We were preventing worse things from escaping," the agent replied coldly. "And now, thanks to your heroics, those protections are gone." The final twist would prove that some rescues come with unexpected consequences. Sarah seemed normal for the first few weeks. She returned to college, posted on social media, laughed with her friends. But gradually, they began to notice changes. She never seemed to sleep. Her reflection sometimes appeared a split second after she moved. And sometimes, late at night, she spoke to people who weren't there. "I think I brought something back with me," she confessed to Jake one evening. "I can see them. All the people who've disappeared over the years. They're still connected to me somehow." "Connected how?" "They're showing me other places. Other houses like Miller's. And Jake, there are so many of them. Because some doors, once opened, can never be completely closed." Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification. A tagged location on Instagram: Blackwood Manor Halloween experience, the scariest night of your life. In the posted photos, she could see them. Faint figures in the background that shouldn't be there. Trapped souls trying to warn future victims. "They're asking for our help," Sarah said quietly. "All of them." Jake looked at the address. "That's 3 states away." "I know." Sarah started gathering her things. "But we can see them now. We can save them." "Sarah, what if it's another trap?" She turned to him with eyes that had seen impossible things. "Then we spring it. Together. And if you're wondering whether the Miller mansion was really gone forever, drive past 1247 Elm Street on any Halloween night. Some say you can still see lights in windows of a house that isn't there. And if you're brave enough to look closely, you might see 5 friends who learn that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Because the truth is, Sarah never really came back. What returned was something that looked like her, sounded like her, but carried the memories and purpose of every soul that house had ever claimed. And now, she's hunting.